Okay guys, so here's the bouncing ball tutorial. It's just meant to get you through the basics of working animation, the graph editor, and looking at the tools. Okay, so a few little things. Everything that you need to key, I have set up in an anim. So I have this guy called anim, we have the spin anim, and then we have the stretch bend anim. Here, or squash bend anim, I guess it's called. Everything else is locked out and hidden, so you can't key it. So because rigs are very delicate, and this is a decent rig. It's not the best, most brilliant thing in the world. It also allows us to, if we look at the hierarchy on it, okay. Different animation needs and controllers need to be at different layers in the hierarchy, okay? And so we'll see as we modify things the fact that the spin is separate from the squash allows us to get a more nuanced effect, and it allows us to spin it around one axis, and then if we look at the translates, we have the translate axis here, where the spin anim, its rotation axis, is at the center of the ball. So I have things on different layers in the hierarchy, but you never really think about that because everything is nice in these nicely labeled, easy to understand animation controls here. All right. So I've set the animation timeline out to 100, and we're just going to do a bit of bouncing on this. And now keying, I like people to start keyframing using the key selected. So that's the right mouse button, key selected there. So I'm on frame 0, it looks like. And then, let's see, so I'm doing the translate Z. And we can push it that way. I guess we can do it in the positive direction. Let's turn that around. Okay, and so there it's bopped out in translate Z by a certain amount. How much? Well, it doesn't really matter. You know, it's what's ever artistically good. And so I set a key on it here. So you always keyframe after you... Well, first you move in time. So the first thing I did there is I moved in time to frame 100, and I then changed the value by moving it over, and then I said, hey, set a keyframe on this. Okay, and if we look at our graph editor, animations graph editor, it looks like this, and you know, well, that's not informative. A on the keyboard is your big friend here. So I hit A on the keyboard, and I can then see the whole curve, and I'm going to just select the Bezier handle here. I'm going to go up and grab the Move tool, and so I want to make sure I have the Move tool selected there, and then I middle mouse button, and I'm just going to get it so it now changes over time very quickly. So I'm changing in value a lot, this is time, and then it slows down in its changing value and takes more time to travel a small distance. So if we look at that now, and so I rewind, so you see how it moves quickly and then slows to a stop there at the very end. So that's one of the things that we want to talk about here. All right, so now that I got it moving along, we're going to animate it bouncing. Now the thing is, at certain points we want it to be down on the ground, and these points we will, and that's one of the reasons why I have this move anim with this pivot point right on the ground, because that means that the pivot point's at 0, and I don't have to think about, oh, do I offset it by 5. So here at, let's go to frame 1. So I'm just going to do a key selected, bam, and I'll go to the last frame. I want it on the ground there, and I do a key selected. And so at frame 25, I do a key selected to say, hey, be on the ground here. At frame 50, I want it to be on the ground, key selected, and frame 75 also on the ground. Okay, so if we look at our graph editor again, and so as I'm working, I have an idea of what it looks like in the graph editor, but the most important thing is what it looks like in the 3D window, because that's what the client is going to receive, right? And so if it looks right, it is right. Okay, but here in the graph editor, as you see, I now have 3 keyframes right through the center. So that's good. So now I will go to frame, let's say 13. All right, I'm doing this at 25 frames a second. And so at frame 13, I'm going to key it vertically. Okay, so I'm just going to move it up vertically. How much is once again an artistic decision. You don't want to worry too much about the numbers. Then I'll pop here to frame 30, 36, maybe 38, I guess. Let's see, 25, 10, yeah, 38 would be about halfway through. And bring it up and set a key on the translate Y. And here I go to 63 and key it up to be up a little less. Now, if you don't get it exactly the way you want it, all right, and you want to make an adjustment, one of the nice things is I can middle mouse button, and if I hold down Shift, all right, and move the mouse up with my first movement, it constrains it in time. So I can change the value there, all right. If I just select it, of course, it's just free, I can move in time and in value. But, let's assume that you're happy with one of those. The other thing is I can hold down Shift, and if my first movement is horizontal, it doesn't change in value, but I can change in time. And so that's very, very nice and very intuitive. Okay, so now I have my 3 bounces. The problem is with the bounces is as we go forward here, you see how it sort of skips along the ground a bit there. Okay, so we want this to really sort of impact and bounce. And the difference between different balls is really the rubber, and then how much how much energy does it take to get it to bounce up. And so that's you change the quality of the rubber or the ball here by changing how high it bounces and the duration and the fast in and fast out. All right, I'm going to just select the translate Y here. It just means that the translate Z disappears. And so I'm going to select the little Bezier handle there with a box. Notice I do a lot of box selections. It says box, okay? But that's why it's good to take the tangent, the translate Z out before I do that. Okay, so there I go. So now that's going to take off very quickly. And I pop to these guys. I can do all 3 of them at once, but I'll do them one at a time. And I'm going to break their tangencies. Now the button for that is this guy here. And what that allows me to do is now bring the ball down very quickly, land on a specific frame, 25. Want to make sure that I don't switch that. If I nudge that so it's at 25.5, then it's not going to render that moment it's on the ground, because it only renders the whole frames. And so I now do the other side, like so. All right, so I go to the next guy here. I select him with a box. This time I'll just break the tangents here. So tangents, break tangents. Maybe you like to work that way better. Okay, so I just pop that up like that. Oops. So that A to frame the curve is very handy. Okay, there we go. Yeah, that's a little much there. All right, zip, good. And I do this guy, go back to my preferred way. Okay, so there we go. So now we have this nice bounce, and you see how it has that snap. Okay, that snap is very important. Okay. Now, one of the things as you're working that you want to do is, let me just, all right, let's go to the Windows. I'm looking for Play Blast, and so I'm just going to click the Play Blast here, and it's going to render out a small movie. And so you want to test your timing here with a play blast. So that's going to pop up a QuickTime, and yeah, and let's see, here we go. Yeah, gee, that's not really showing much on the video, but anyhow, the point is that it's you look at your timing there in a movie and take the CPU time calculations out of it, right? So that's really important. Okay, so now that we got that going, let's grab the animation spin, the spin anim here. I'm going to go back to frame 1 and set a key on it. So key selected. And then I'm going to go to frame 100 and I'm going to spin that a few times. Okay, I may have to reselect and spin. All right, and that should do me. And so I go back to my graph editor. And here's what it looks like for the spinning. And so once again, I'm just going to have it go spinning quickly near the beginning and slowing down near the end. So let's take a look at that. There we go. Alrighty. So that's looking pretty good. And so you see, by not using the S key that keys everything selected, I keep all this stuff nice and just enough keyframes, just the keyframes I want. Very targeted, very specific. My scene's not cluttered with extra stuff I have to delete. And that's why I want you doing that key selected and be very aware of what you're keying. Okay? So I work with auto key, but as you're starting out, you should turn auto key to off and make sure you're in control. You're the one saying, I want this object to have this value at this point in time. Okay? So that's looking good. Okay, so we have a nice little snap, we have a nice little roll to it, and as you see, it's moving with the pivot point down here, which makes it easy to put it on the ground plane, and then it's rotating with this guy around the center. Next, we'll grab our squash bend anim here. Zooming out a little bit, like that. Okay, so I got two controllers here, and the first one we'll do is the scale, which controls the squash. Woo! So you see how the squash maintains the volume, and we didn't have to do any math like in the old days to do this. So we always had to do this, it's just now we have nice controllers, and I've set up things for you to make it easy. Alright, so I'm going to start this guy, well actually let's be smart about this. I'm going to need him flat at the top of each peak. So I'm going to key selected here at 0. I'm going to go, I think it's 13 where the peak is. And so I'll do a key selected there. And hop over here to, what was it, 38? 38 sounds good. Key selected. I will then go to 63, I think it was. You know, and the key points in your animation are the important stuff. Write it down on a piece of paper. You know, sketch it out. So, all right. And then I think that's it. Yeah, those are those guys. And, all right. I think about 80 I'll do the last one there. Great. So now I'm going to pop back to 0. And I'll just scale it up a little bit. And okay, so now it hits at frame 25, and so at frame 25 I'm going to push this down. So there I get that squash effect. I do my key selected to say, hey, on frame 25 make sure you're squashed like this. Okay, so bam, and then it hits the top of the arc there, and it is back to being a nice round ball. And then I come down here to frame 50 and I'll squash it down again like that. So there's the impact. Yeah, maybe not the same amount as before. Well, all right, I can tweak that in the graph editor. But you know, obviously I want a little bit less. key selected, because the ball is losing energy. It's sort of the theme. As we go through time here, it loses energy. And so here at frame 75, I'll just do a little, and then it just sort of bounces back up there. And see how it's moving there a little bit at the end. All right, I'm gonna do two little adjustments there because I'm not so super happy with that. So I'm gonna go back to my graph editor. So I have the move anim. Note how the graph editor always shows the selected item. Okay, so let's see. I'm gonna just cheat this guy a little bit forward. Okay, so that's gonna help. And then I'm gonna grab my rotate X on the spin anim. So I changed my selection there. All right, so let's want the rotation to stop really right about the same time. Okay, so now let's look at that. Bam. Okay. All right, maybe I'll take that back again. A on the keyboard. So they need to relate. Yeah, so that's what I'm worried about here. Yeah, okay. Now I've erred too much on the other side. Okay, so needs to stop rolling and translating at the same time, right? Because that gives the illusion that the ball is actually rolling along the surface. Okay, so that's good. Great. So now we have it bouncing, but we got a problem here. And that is, yes, it's flat at frame 25, but the problem is it's also sort of getting flat before it hits. That doesn't make sense, right? So let's pop back to our graph editor, and so we can see what's going on as we do it. All right, so there's my scale. All right, that guy can hang out like that. So here on 24, I'm going to grab that scale tool again. There we go. I'll just extend that up like this. Gee, okay, that gets really messy in the graph editor. Doesn't matter. Okay, so there it's elongated, and so it comes down, it elongates as it comes down, it's still rotating there, and then bam, it hits. And then as it comes out, I'm going to have it elongate maybe 3 frames later. So it's less dramatic. So there's a little more transition there. Okay, so then it goes up into that hang time. It goes back to being a round ball. Same problem on the next guy. So I go 1 frame before the impact, and I elongate like so. And there we go. And yeah, okay, that's less than the previous one. Because remember, we're trying to convey that the energy is slowly coming out of the ball. So I go a few frames later. Now last time I did 3 frames. This time it's going to take a little bit longer because we're losing energy. So I do 4 frames, pull it up a bit. So it's lower than this guy. It goes back to being a round ball. Same problem on the last one. It's consistent. And so I just scale that up a bit. Not much, because a lot of the energy is out. And so, bam, it hits. Okay. And then it just does that last little transition. All right, so maybe I tone even this guy down a bit. There we go. So I went right back to 75, and I make sure I rewrite over that frame very precisely. Okay, so now if we watch this, okay, so you see how you have that really nice impact. All right, let's just make sure we're set to, yeah, we're set to play every frame. Good, and all right, and so that 1 frame of splat, you see it every time, even though it's 1 frame where it's elongated or splatted out on the ground. It's very visible, so it has to be there. even at a 25th of a second. All right, and then the last thing is we want to anticipate the motion of this a little bit. And we're going to do that with this rotate attribute. Let's just go back here to the beginning and F, okay. Let's see. And so now if I rotate like this, you see what happens. So that's the rotate. It's driving a bend deformer if you're curious. Okay, so I'm just going to start it off here. Key selected. I guess I should go and key it to be straight up in each of the tops of the arcs. So that's what, 13, 38. So key selected. And key selected again. And here at the end, at 80, we key select it. Alrighty. And then I just go to that frame 24 right before it hits, and I just rock it back like that. And then, that's pretty good. So that's sort of the angle it's coming down, right? So there, it impacts, and now it's going to spring forward. And so there's the 25, I go to frame 26, I tweak it forward or rotate it forward there, and now it shoots up in that direction. The ball is still rotating, right? All that's still happening. Okay, so now we come down again, rotate it back, key selected, one frame after the impact, say, hey, I'm now springing this way, rotate it forward, key selected, goes up, neutralizes, and here on the that last impact, once again, I just don't do it as much. All right, so A, make sure you do your key selected, and I think we'll just make sure. This is where you use the graph editors. You can just make sure everything relates the way you want it to relate. And so I slowly take the energy out of the bouncing ball. And yeah, all right, I'll go 2 frames. So that way it does a little wobble. Maybe take the value really far down, make that small. Okay, let's grab the scale. And yeah, no, it doesn't need another. Just need another little hiccup after that. Key selected. I'll add a little something there. Just there we go. Just a little, a little extra wave there at the end. Okay, so that's your basic bouncing ball tutorial. And as you see, that gives us a very nice cartoony ball that feels right. Okay, and it has life to it. It has snap. It has energy. And that's where you start. And everything else builds on that, and a lot of times it really is just this simple. Hope that helps. Have fun.